What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. Terence Crawford, the current WBO champ at welterweight, just had his most important, significant performance by stopping two-time former champ Shawn Porter in the 10th round of a very interesting and competitive fight. This is pretty much the type of style clash that we wanted when they first made Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter. A lot of the boxing world felt that Terence Crawford, feels that Terence Crawford is the top 2, top 3 pound for pound talent. Some might even have him at 1. That's another conversation for another day. But the idea was that we know Terence Crawford has the tools. We just haven't seen him have to use them against anybody in the welterweight division. I mean, this is somebody who's now a 3-division champion. He held the belt at 135. He unified all 4 major belts at 140, and he has been the WBO champ for a few title defenses now at welterweight. But this fight versus Shawn Porter was basically his portal into premier boxing champions stable of elite welterweights. Basically all of the best welterweights besides Terence Crawford and I'd say Errol Ortiz Jr. are basically on PBC. So Terence Crawford has been this, remarkable talent who's been like a Swiss Army knife, who people basically feel have so many different aspects to his skill set where you could fight just about any style of fight that a particular matchup or situation calls for. Terence Crawford has had all that, but hasn't had the signature win, the career-defining win, to truly cement his legacy and make the statement, the undeniable statement, that he is the force to be reckoned with at welterweight. So this stoppage performance, which, I thought that this was going to be a near draw fight that goes to the scorecards. So to see Shawn Porter get dropped twice in one round and get stopped. I mean, this wasn't your quintessential stoppage where the referee has to jump in and save him, or he doesn't beat the 10 count, or he's just up against the ropes getting hammered. He was getting picked apart by the 10th round, where you saw so many ebbs and flows in strategy. You saw what was working well with Porter. He was able to change angles and jump in without taking the worst of Terence Crawford's power punches. And, a lot of people gave Shawn Porter like 3 out of the first 4 rounds. Some had it 2-2 after 4. Many had it 3-3 after 6, or 4-2 Shawn Porter after 6 rounds. But it began to get harder and harder to give Shawn Porter any rounds after the 6th. I think some might have either given him the 7th or the 8th. One of those 2 rounds, maybe. The 3 judges had it either 5 rounds to 4 Terence Crawford at the time of the stoppage, or one judge had it 6-3 at the time of the stoppage. So, scorecards were basically all over the place. They could have been 6-3 Crawford, maybe, even though I think that would have been very unfavorable to Shawn Porter. I thought that it was either 5-4 Crawford or 5-4 Porter. There might have even been an argument to be made 6-3 Porter, but that would be as 6-3 Crawford. I think 5-4 either way was probably the most accurate gauge of the round by round happenings of this fight. But there was one final adjustment that it seemed that Terence Crawford made around. First of all, he switched to southpaw relatively early against Kell Brook. He did it in the 3rd. In this Shawn Porter fight, he did it in the 2nd round. But as I'm watching this fight, my brother makes the point that look at what he's doing when Terence Crawford is throwing that sweeping lead right hook, because he kind of checked Porter early with it. That's the same kind of lead right after the switch to southpaw that he hit Kell Brook with, that eventually stopped him. Well, not even really eventually, almost immediately after Kell Brook got hit with that, he was stopped. But the adjustment that he made against Shawn Porter here involved an uppercut to the body, where because Shawn Porter was keeping a low crouch, you go for the chest area. At worst, you catch him with a nice shot to the chest, and at best, although most would say they would rather take the head shot than the body shot, but you can also catch Shawn Porter in the chin or face area, depending on how low he's crouching, when you throw that kind of step around uppercut that was often following a sweeping lead right hand from the southpaw stance. So you throw the southpaw right hook and then follow it with the uppercut, and towards the end of the fight, he could not miss Shawn Porter with that uppercut. It hit him hard to the body a few times before the headshots that dropped him. So yeah, basically we all saw what we needed to see from Terence Crawford. Unbelievable skill set and performance ability for Terence Crawford. Like, even when he's losing rounds, you get the feeling that he is in control. He just has this demeanor, which is a bit of a poker game, but he just has this demeanor that says, yeah, I have this under control. And he earns this hugely significant first person to stop Shawn Porter, 10th round TKO against Porter. And after the fight, in the post-fight press conference, Shawn Porter retires from the sport of boxing. Two-time former champ, but had the narrative because of the fights that he did lose when he fought a prime Kell Brook, prime Keith Thurman. The Keith Thurman one was extremely close, as was a split decision loss to Errol Spence. This was the only one that truly had a stamp on it. But you look at Shawn Porter's losses and the reputation that he had basically at every moment outside of when he first emerged as a champion by defeating Devin Alexander and then stopping Paulie Malignaggi, looking brilliant in that 2-fight stretch where you could probably have him as a top 2 welterweight at that time. That was kind of his defining I'm here moment. But after that, he lost the biggest fights that he had, which kind of kept him out of being the guy at welterweight. He was always just the A-, even if it was due to, slightly unfavorable scorecards where you fought a very even fight where some people had it this way, some people had it that way, but it just didn't amount to a win for Shawn Porter. Those types of losses to the absolute best in the division at the time. We can have the is he a Hall of Famer discussion, down the line, but I wanted to take a moment and just say that as a boxing fan, I have been absolutely thrilled with watching the career that is Shawn Porter's. His biggest wins, I would say, were against Devin Alexander, post-prime Paulie Malignaggi, Yordenis Ugas. That's a win that's actually aged very well. It didn't mean a ton when it happened because most didn't really know who Ugas was or how good he was. Some did, but he, hadn't yet beaten Manny Pacquiao, right? So a lot changes. And Ugas' stock grew after that super close loss. I actually thought that Ugas deserved the win against Shawn Porter by maybe 1 round, but the close split decision win for Porter actually elevated Ugas' stock because he performed so well against Shawn Porter, who everybody knows is the real deal, serious business. Another couple big wins were against Andre Berto, Adrian Broner. Like, he's had some big wins, but just came up just short every time it was time to step up and to define yourself as the best in the division. So there's nothing to be ashamed of about a legacy like that. Danny Garcia, that might be Shawn Porter's biggest win. So yeah, he has beaten some very good fighters throughout his career, and he might be picking the right time to retire. It was very interesting. After the fight, there was a post-fight moment where, his dad, Kenny Porter, dad/trainer, was asked, basically, why did he stop the fight? And he said, this one's easy. It had nothing to do with this or that. It was preparation. He basically told the audience and the interviewer that my son underprepared for this fight, and once you get to a certain point, you think you know everything, you don't train the same. Basically, it's really stunning the audience to where it drew a lot of boos from the audience because we have so much admiration and empathy for Shawn Porter. But hey, that was Pop speaking. Very strong words from somebody who obviously cares and loves his son a ton. Just basically kept him 100, or was being as honest as he saw it, and it drew no argument from Shawn Porter. And you have to understand that father-son relationships vary in terms of the way that one is able to talk to or about the other. So I just respect the father-son relationship. And it's just interesting because this is also a trainer-student or trainer-fighter relationship. That could always get interesting as well. But yeah, man, Terence Crawford pulls off the stoppage win over Shawn Porter, and Shawn Porter retires. I just hope that Terence Crawford leaves Top Rank, which it sounded like he was going to do it. Like, he basically said, if Bob couldn't get me the fight that I wanted when I was with him, what makes me think he could get it or get me that fight when I'm not with him? And he said, I am basically moving on with my career. That sounds like to me that he is leaving Bob Arum, Top Rank, ESPN platform. So the next logical step would be to move to PBC and to make Errol Spence, Terence Crawford happen at some point. I mean, look, Terence Crawford is 34 now, or almost 34, if not 34. If he's 35 by the time he gets in the ring with Errol Spence, that would be a travesty, because that basically means you're no longer dealing with absolute prime Terence Crawford. I mean, hell, we might already be past Terence Crawford's prime. Now, it was still enough to stop Shawn Porter, so I think, no, we're probably still in Terence Crawford's prime. But you do not want to let this fight spoil and go past its expiration date. I don't want to see Terence Crawford in the same age and performance part of the career trajectory that Gennady Golovkin was in when he first finally stepped foot in the ring with Canelo Alvarez. I don't want to see that for Terence Crawford. I want to see prime Errol Spence versus prime Terence Crawford. That's what the boxing world wants and needs. Now, does Errol Spence need or deserve a tune-up fight before fighting somebody like Terence Crawford? I'm sure he probably has a mandatory waiting for him. I mean, he hasn't fought since December of 2020, since he beat Danny Garcia. And let's be honest, I mean, he has been through a ton from that car accident, which he looked good against Danny Garcia after the accident. But for me, questions still remain what the long-term impact is of getting launched from your car and hitting the ground at an extremely high speed. What kind of effect that has on a fighter, short, long term? Not to mention the newly discovered detached retina that kept him out of what would have been the biggest showdown of the year. No doubt, Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao, that would have been the biggest and best fight you can make. I mean, it still might not be a better fight than Spence and prime Terence Crawford, but just because of the name elevation of Manny Pacquiao and how much of a global star he's been over the past couple decades. But yeah, detached retina, the car accident, the inactivity. Errol Spence has been a tremendous talent and is having an amazing career. Still undefeated, WBC and IBF champ, has some signature wins over Kell Brook, Lamont Peterson, Shawn Porter, Danny Garcia, Chris Algieri. He's beaten a lot of really good fighters already. Leonard Bundu, prime Leonard Bundu for what it's worth. Some of y'all might remember him. Mikey Garcia. Yeah, many tremendous wins for Errol Spence. I just don't know with 100% certainty where he's at performance and abilities wise. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that, whether he takes some sort of a tune-up or just a fight that isn't Terence Crawford, a mandatory or something like that. But yeah, this was a fight that had to happen for Terence Crawford. It did happen. He got the stoppage, not only the win over Shawn Porter, but the stoppage. So that changes a lot of the narrative that is taking place at the welterweight division. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the fight. How did you have the scorecards at the time? And what do you think the aftermath of this fight should include? Who should fight who? And relatively when on the 2022 calendar? Let me know in the comments, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.